Welcome to All Rings Considered, the podcast on all things Tolkien. I'm Charlie, and with me is...
Pip.
Hi, Pip. And this is the introductory episode. Oh, hi. This is the introductory episode to our latest series, a Lord of the Rings read-through. Pip, can you tell us what we're going to do in this series?
So in this series, we're going to be taking a read through Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings. And on each episode, we're going to go through one chapter, giving a summary of its plot, and then discussing what each chapter means in the context of the book. So be prepared for spoilers, if that's a concern for you, because we're going to be talking about each chapter as it fits in with the whole work. And also a note about perspective. We are going to be taking a look at both interesting things that would be for a first-time reader and also for someone who has had a wealth of Tolkien knowledge.
And just to be clear, that's J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings.
It is.
Oh, good to know. So I think we should start by introducing ourselves a little bit. We actually have done this on our previous episodes about the movies, but we are just two enthusiasts. I don't think we have any particularly special qualifications to discuss this, but even though we are amateurs, we have read this book a number of times. We have been sort of immersed in Tolkien's work for much of our lives. Maybe too long.
We're
too
just
much of our lives.
Regular chuckleheads, yucking it up about the Middle-earth.
Right. As regular chuckleheads do. But I want to start this introductory episode by talking about what exactly it is we like about this book and why we actually think it is liked by so many other people as well. So when I think about The Lord of the Rings and its massive popularity, one thing that strikes me is that it seems that almost everybody has a different reason for enjoying this book. And it reminds me, there's this story that I think comes from the Lord of the Rings Reader's Companion by, I think it's Wayne Hammond and Christina Scull. And they talk about this one particular scholar going to some Tolkien conference in the 1980s or something. And he's there with, something like two dozen people, and they're all sort of experts on Tolkien, and they're all speaking about him and writing about him. And he asks, well, what exactly makes this book so popular? Why is it so well loved? And he is talking to 24 people and essentially gets 24 different answers. Everybody seems to like it for a different reason. Some people seem to love like the really detailed world building. Some people really love the prose. Some people just love the influentialness of it, how it's the first great high fantasy novel and all these things. And which gets me thinking about what exactly do I like about this book? I can tell you, I actually am not really big on world building stuff. I don't really care about world building. Usually when I read through the book, I take all the vast details Tolkien shoves into it just as for sort of aesthetic effect, rather than because I actually care about what they're referencing or what they are. To me, it just builds a cool aesthetic effect that people can sort of reference these old mythological things. For me, I actually think I end up liking this book for two big primary reasons. The first would be I actually think it's extraordinarily well written. I think the prose is actually beautiful. I think it's unusual prose. I don't think it's what you would normally expect in a novel. But once you kind of get into the style, it's really gripping and really just poetic. The second reason, though, that I actually end up really enjoying this book is, quite frankly, I think the themes are really interesting. I think it has a lot to say. I think the messages in it aren't typical, and as a result, I find it just incredibly powerful. You combine the beautiful prose with, I think, the really interesting themes, you just have a book that I'm just going to fall in love with. And I say that actually as somebody who, in case you couldn't tell when I said I couldn't care less about world building, I'm not a fantasy reader. Like I haven't read any fantasy books outside of Tolkien. I don't really care to. I'm not particularly interested in reading them. Maybe I've read maybe some of the classics, but it's I haven't gone around and read George R. R. Martin or Patrick Rothfuss or whoever writes The Name of the Wind or whatever these things are. So I don't like it for the fantasy aspects. I really do think it's just a phenomenal, interesting work of literature. What about you, Pep?
So I think I'll go off of something you said about everybody finding something different in this book to appreciate. And I think one way to consider great mythology is a set of narratives through which we can understand our world as we're going through it. And I think personally I found here a set of narratives that really made sense to me in a capital T truth way. And I think one thing about a great piece of art is that great art is almost inexhaustible. And what I mean by that is you can come at the work from different perspectives, or from a different time in your life, or looking at it in a certain light, and always get something new out of it, always get something different. And I think that is a criteria of The Lord of the Rings that really makes it a great work.
Yeah, one thing too that I want to emphasize, and I hinted at this sort of when I talked about the prose, I called it unusual prose. I think, though, the book doesn't get enough credit by both its fans and its critics for how weird it is and how strange it is. Everything about this book, to me, if you really think about it, is bizarre. And it's almost hard to see that now because it's been so influential. But this, to me, I read this sometimes, when I reread it, I guess I should say, and I feel like this must have been like the infinite jest of its day. Like, it just seems like it should be normal, I guess, but it's this big, dense, weird thing. I think a lot of that's going to come out when we discuss this chapter by chapter, exactly which parts I think are weird, but just the very act of, it's like this simultaneously this fairy tale / myth with like these appendices, but it's a novel, and the language is like archaic, but it's not in a ham-fisted way. It's really beautiful, but it's just, there's nothing like it.
It's a story within a story. It's technically the book that you're reading is actually, it's supposed to be a book that someone in that world wrote.
Yeah, so it's something, again, I think the critics kept overlooking this because they just dismissed it. They dismissed perhaps its strangeness as some kind of mistake. When I actually think it's one of its strengths. I think it's very bold. It's for its bizarre nature. And I think the fans overlook it too, actually, sometimes. They don't really realize how weird this book is. It's so weird that, I describe this as my favorite book, and I almost never recommend it to people. I don't think I ever would. Yeah. Because I'd be like, well, this is my favorite book, but it's really weird. I'm not sure I'd actually tell you to read it, because it either finds you or it doesn't.
Well, Charlie, I'm excited. Let me tell you that.
Me too. With all that being said, please join us next time for episode 1, chapter 1 of book 1, A Long Expected Party.